Taoiseach, just want to answer a number of questions, or ask a number of questions in relation to the appointment of Mr McNulty to the Board of the Irish Museum of Modern Art by Minister Humphreys, and particularly I think your attempt yesterday in the Dáil to bring clarity to it didn't succeed, and I think has raised far more questions than answers, and a lack of clarity. And Taoiseach, you know, if I could sort of paraphrase what has emerged, it seems that Mr McNulty in his interview with you said he was interested in becoming a member of a cultural body, that he was interviewed by you for the Seanad nomination, that mysteriously Fine Gael officials became aware of his desire to serve on such a body, that they then sent a memo or CV over to the Minister, Heather Humphreys, saying put him on a cultural body, and that she then in great haste decided to put him on the Board of IMMA with another person, and that the entire process of nominating him to the Seanad as a Fine Gael process was completely separate, absolutely, to the process of his nomination to the Board of the Irish Museum of Modern Art. At this stage, this is what we appear to have been asked. And I don't know whether you were aware or not, Taoiseach, that Minister Humphreys was asked by Fine Gael officials, or was going to appoint Mr McNulty to the Board of IMMA. And of course that brings into question the role of Minister Humphreys. Why won't she do interviews on this? Why will she not come before the House and just give a comprehensive statement on it? When did she receive the request from Fine Gael officials to appoint him to the Board of IMMA? Who mandated them to make that request of you? And why did she act with such haste in increasing the size of the board to facilitate his appointment, rather than just wait for a casual vacancy to arise and then fill it in the normal way? So there's a whole range of questions, but I only want to ask you one question, Taoiseach, and I'd appreciate a very clear answer, because I asked it yesterday and Deputy Adams asked it and we didn't get a clear answer. Did you, Taoiseach, or did somebody on your behalf in government buildings ask Fine Gael officials to tell Minister Heather Humphreys to appoint Mr McNulty to a cultural body?
Thank you, Deputy.
Yes or no?
Taoiseach.
I would have thought my job over here is to lead a government that's sort out our finances and get our country turned around. I thought you might want to talk about the live register figures this morning, but you don't. I listened to your own comments this morning, actually. Deputy Martin. You made 3 points here. First of all, you mentioned about asking a minister to make an appointment. Secondly, you said this morning about telling a minister to make an appointment. And thirdly, you mentioned about expressing that a candidate had an interest in being appointed. I've dealt with all of this. I've accepted responsibility. I've apologised to the entire process, and I'm going to fix that and oversee it. Because I'll tell you one thing now. Tell you, Deputy Martin, I'm actually sick and tired. I'm sick and tired now of a position where we have a flawed process for years in this country, where people who want to give public service, because of the flaw in the process, Deputy Martin, can be labelled as lackeys, hacks, or cronies. Now, this morning, I want to say this. Yes, Deputy McGrath, this is the forum of the Dáil. I heard a name on national radio this morning of a young man appointed to a state board who was deemed to be eligible on the basis of having worked in a bar or having supervised a pool room. I know the young man in question. I saw him grow from. I'm going to say this. I saw him grow from a primary school lad to the adult that he is. And that young man has an honours degree in a Bachelor of Science. He's got a master's degree in Innovation and Management. He did his stint in Brussels. He worked as every other student did in a bar for the summer. He applied for a job with a multinational. I'm going to make the point. He applied for a job in a multinational with cloud computing. There were 5,000 applications. There were less than 10 accepted, of which he was one. And the point I'm going to make to you, Deputy Martin, is a point you will appreciate, that He wanted to give of public duty and public service. I'll answer your question. But because the firm doesn't give him time off, Deputy Martin, he takes 10 days holidays to attend to his public service duty. And yet he's branded as a crony and as a lackey, and that's wrong. And I'm sick of that situation, and now we're going to change it. And from the 1st of November, this will not apply anymore. When you made another point in your opening question. When I interviewed John McNulty, who was very forthright again this morning on radio, he's an excellent candidate. I never discussed anything with him about cultural boards or any other boards. I discussed with him his potential as a senator to do a political job, because this was a political seat for the Fine Gael party, which arose from the election of Deirdre Clune to the European Parliament. And that assertion was made yesterday evening as well. John McNulty never discussed with me anything to do with boards or culture or anything else. We discussed the operation of the Seanad, his capacity to be a good senator and to serve in the area from where he comes from. So the answer to that question is there was no instruction given to the Minister for Arts, Heritage and the Gaeltacht. She herself read his qualifications, read his credentials, and appointed him, as she was entitled to do, to the member of the board. And as John McNulty said himself, he did not know at the time that he was appointed whether he was going to be a candidate for the Senate or not. He was a person who was being considered for nomination, but he didn't know. So as far as I'm concerned, Deputy Martin, now, we need to move on here. This was a flawed process. Yes. I tell you, sometime, if you want to have a long debate about what happened over the years, we can do that. That's not for today. This process has been flawed. This process is now going to be fixed. And I want to see a situation where people in our country, wherever they come from, who want to serve on boards and do public duty, can do so without being branded because of the flawed process. And allowing them to do their job. And now we're going to fix that and put it in absolutely transparent, absolutely accountable, absolutely external examinations of credentials, and move on from there.
Thank you. Can I just say, sorry, Deputy, could I have order, please, for the people asking questions and for the reply of Deputy Micheál Martin.
Taoiseach, yesterday in your reply to me, and I'll quote back to you what you said to me, during the course of the process of validating his eligibility, Mr. McNulty expressed a wish to serve on a cultural body because he was intending to serve, if elected, to the cultural and educational panel. A second ago, you flatly contradicted what you said yesterday when you said to me you had no conversation, good, bad or indifferent, with Mr. McNulty in relation to a cultural body. And Taoiseach, I asked about nobody, about any other appointment in my opening remark to you, but I only asked about Mr. McNulty's appointment to IMMA. It's the only question. Now, you went down a diversionary route. This story is unravelling as it gets made up. And one gets a terrible sense that people are trying to piece together and concoct a story that ends up blaming Fine Gael officials. Who mandated the Fine Gael officials to go to Minister Humphreys and say that Mr. McNulty wants to be appointed and should be appointed to a cultural body? Who mandated them to do that? Are you seriously suggesting that senior headquarter officials in Fine Gael went off without your knowledge or without your endorsement and went and said to the minister, appoint him? Did any other names come from the Fine Gael officials other than Mr. McNulty to be appointed? And look at the window we're talking about, Taoiseach. Talking about a few days between his nomination to the Seanad to contest the election on your behalf and his nomination to IMMA.
Thank you,
there was no casual vacancy in IMMA. The government had limited it to a certain number of 9 members. So with great haste, the minister decides, out of the blue, to appoint him to the board because Fine Gael officials decided, out of the blue, to suggest to the minister that he should be appointed because they weren't apparently mandated by anybody. It's a complete mystery. And correspondents asked your spokesperson yesterday, who told the Fine Gael officials, who asked the Fine Gael officials to tell or to say to Minister Humphreys to nominate him? And do you know what the reply from your spokesperson was? you better ask them.
Thank you. Sorry, Deputy.
You better ask then the Fine Gael officials. Now, Taoiseach, all I'm looking for here is the truth about what happened. And maybe if we got it last week, early on, there would be no need for any of this. So, Taoiseach, would you just come back to the basic point? Who told the Fine Gael officials and who asked them to go to Minister Humphreys and say, appoint Mr McNulty to the board of the Irish Museum of Modern Art?
Yeah, well, you've taken the wrong line again. When I spoke to John McNulty about his capacity to be a person who would be considered for nomination to the Seanad, and that's what I spoke to him about. When I gave my imprimatur to say this is a person whom we should consider to nominate to the Senate, the Fine Gael, the system of validating, of validating candidates took over from there. And we had already set up, internally in the party, a subcommittee of the Executive Council to consider names for consideration to be nominated to the Senate. There were 44 nominations submitted, 29 people. So there were 29 being considered. And obviously, the Fine Gael personnel working with that, in the course of those conversations with John McNulty, he indicated that he would like to serve on a cultural board if he was intending to be a candidate for a cultural and education panel. And as he said himself this morning, he did not know when he was appointed by the Minister to the Board of IMMA that he would be a candidate for the Senate. But my point yesterday, and which I answered to you clearly, in accepting the fact that the process within the Fine Gael system was itself flawed, because the official dealing with this did not go back to the subcommittee of the Executive Council, and that was the cause of great angst and a cause of concern to me, because they took it upon themselves to do that. Now, I want to say to you that it's a case here of having accepted responsibility, of having apologised for standards having slipped, and doing something about it and fixing it in general. So I don't accept your assertion at all. The position here is that I made it perfectly clear that the appointment being put forward was something that shouldn't have happened because he was being considered as a candidate for nomination to the Seanad. And the point is, the internal mechanics of IMMA then said if a person is nominated, they must stand down. So I've accepted that. I'm fixing the internal mechanics of the way the Fine Gael party does its business, and that's not for here. But in general, as head of government, yesterday government made a decision to have a new framework starting from the 1st of November for all public appointments to be publicly advertised, externally validated, where every minister will set out the conditions and the criteria that apply for each of the boards under their department responsibility. So we're not going to have the system that applied since the foundation of the state. And in the meantime, any board appointments that must be made between here and November will be announced by ministers so that everybody will know that the following vacancies are occurring on whatever boards. So it's a case, Deputy Martin, of accepting that this system is flawed in general, that we need to reform it. We've made the government decision. It will be implemented from the 1st of November on stateboard.ie so that every member of the public in Gorey or Wexford or wherever who wishes to do public service on a board can check on that. They will know the boards, the vacancies, the criteria, the skills, the conditions that are required, and they will be verified by the Public Appointments Service, and names sent to a minister will be already authenticated as being people of quality to serve in whatever board. And I hope that that puts an end, Deputy Martin, during your time and everybody else's time. When the flaw in the system, allowed for people to be pilloried as cronies. And I remember, of course, if you want to debate, Deputy Martin, sometime at considerable length about what, if you want to debate about what happened in the past. I consider we can do it when things are less pressing on the changes that we have to make to get our country right.
Thank you.
I'd start again. You and I have got to deal with the fragile situation in Northern Ireland. Government have to deal with the budget in just 10 days' time. We've got to deal with a whole range of challenges up here for our country. I've accepted responsibility. I've apologised. We're doing something about it. We're fixing it not just in this case, but for all others for the next for many years.